Welcome to Punch Keys Podcast. I'm Poppy Minix, your co-host, bringing you blunt talk for the fiction novelist.
And I'm Cascade, your other writerly co-host. If you love to ramble about writing and need a tribe, you found us.
Are you ready? We're uncorking now. Let's talk about punching those keys.
It's that time.
I love this time.
Punch Keys Podcast.
Yay.
No one is going to believe me. I am not a singer. I do not like to sing. I do not sing in front of people. But for some reason, when I'm sitting down in my little cement hole dungeon, yes, I'm in a cement hole dungeon, and I am videoing it up with Poppy, I just start singing. So now
it's fantastic.
Everyone who finds this podcast is going to think that Cascade likes to sing, and she does it poorly, and you would be correct on one of those.
I don't think you do it poorly, but
oh, you're sweet.
I love that you jump in and sing in our podcast. It makes me very happy.
So, welcome to Punch Keys. You're here for episode 7. We are tonight talking about character voice. I'm so excited.
Oh my gosh, I love character voice.
It's the best.
Whew.
So, as we were talking about this episode and gearing up and getting ready for it, there's definitely a distinction that we wanted to make between character voice and author voice.
Yeah.
What? They're not the same thing?
Totally not the same thing.
All right. So, what's the difference to you, Poppy?
Oh, so everybody has an authorial voice, right? You have a style of writing, you have a rhythm, you start to figure yourself out, and that's what you start writing in. For me, that's author voice, the way that you create your sentences.
Yep, you'll have like certain sentence structures that you love.
Yes, and your tone. So all these things sort of combine into who you are as an author and what you're portraying out to the world. That, for me, is author voice. Whereas your character voice is something that is just completely different because you have stepped into somebody else's shoes and you have borrowed a voice. You have created something that's different from your own. Because if all your characters had your author voice, they would all sound exactly the same. They'd sound like you. And that isn't interesting to read. You need different voices. Well,
if you're only writing one book ever, then and you
with
have
one character.
Well, if you're just from their point of view, hopefully your other characters can at least.
But if your other characters have dialogue and they're speaking the dialogue that you would typically speak, then everybody's going to sound exactly the same, and that becomes monotone and kind of boring.
It does. Two other things that I've noticed when looking up and trying to get a better grasp on author voice, because character voice I love character voice. Author voice, I'm kind of like, how do you define that? One is pacing. How quickly you get into points of your plot, your climaxes, how long you take in the uphill, if you give a breather after a climax, how long you stay in the climax. You'll start seeing patterns too if you have like a more complicated plot where you like to recap, how you like to lay out your breadcrumbs. Is all, yep. Bobby likes to call them cupcakes, which is way better. Sugar's better than carbs. Yeah. Well, I guess cupcakes have both. But all of that's your author voice. And then another thing that I think is huge for author voice is your theme and how well you thread that through your story. If you have... Some books don't have like a really deep theme. Sometimes it's just a feel good, or sometimes it's just a really simple get to the point. And some have very complex, deep themes that like the society is dealing with, and they're trying to speak out about something that's going on, and they're going to show it in different layers and point of views, and all of that I think is also author voice, the purpose of the story.
Yeah, what it means to you as an author.
And there's no wrong way. It's okay to have like a feel good versus a really deep, complex read, because I love both. I need both. Sometimes I can't handle one and I want the other. And it's a variety of readers out there. So don't ever feel like when you can peg yourself in a particular group that there's anything wrong with that group or there's anything wrong with that writing style. Because there's not.
Yeah. Yes.
Any other things that you have noticed for author voice? And then I think we can just kind of jump into character voice, because I think that's really what we want to talk about.
That's true. I mean, for author voice, it's always very interesting to me because if the book is well written, I feel like you don't typically understand author voice sometimes. Like you don't see it, you don't know it. And granted, you might want to read everything that author has ever written before. And so for me, that's author voice. If you adhere to that author's everything, the way that they say things, their descriptions, the style that they write in, the way that they describe their world building, whether it's light or whether it's super heavy, that's the author voice. And you are sticking to what you love about them is their author voice. But that is totally different from the characters, because if they're doing their job, you have character voice that is vastly different from other characters. You have these incredible styles and rhythms and spacing between of these characters that just are quirky and weird and then solemn and quiet. And it's just so fun to be able to experiment and jump into somebody else's shoes to say it.
So let's go into that. How do you start developing a character voice? What are some building blocks for you?
When you're in your first draft, you're just trying to get down your plot. You're just trying to get down your beats and you're trying to get down what's going on. It depends on how you write. I definitely am very character based. So I start figuring out who's going to get along with who, because I'm a romance writer and we need to figure out who's going to get along with who else and who's going to be all the kissy bits and who's going to do what to do who, and who's going to fight and who's going to poke and who's going to be quirky and zany and who's going to be quiet and solemn and grumpy. And so those are the character voices for me, is that I always end up with this grumpy chick and she's very serious, and you end up with this like zany dude that you all know, that guy, and he always walks in and you're just like, oh, what's he going to say today? Those, I just love the character voices in those, that they walk into a scene and they just steal every second of it.
Like, how do you express that stuff? How do you show like a zany character? I mean, and I think the first thing that pops into mind, obviously, you say, what is he going to say? So like dialogue is always a huge part of developing a character.
Yes.
How else do you show a zany character?
Just by the things that they do, their traits, the way that they think. When you think about characters, you think about the people that you've met through your life. You listen to people. We're all so different. And it doesn't matter if we were neighbors growing up together. People have different voices and people speak differently. They name things different things. There's so many different things to think about, especially when you're in second and third edits. Is it a t-shirt or is it a tee? Just little stuff. What do they think of these things? What do they call these things? What means something to them? Do they use metaphors? What kind of metaphors do they use? Do they like sports? Do they use sports metaphors? There's so many different things that go into that.
That's one of my favorite things. I think one of my favorite series is Patricia Briggs does the Mercedes Thompson series, Urban Fantasy. The main character is a female mechanic.
Yes.
And every time she has a metaphor, it's always about cars and fixing cars. I do not care at all about cars. My husband was car shopping for us and he got so frustrated because he's like, well, what kind of cars do you like? I said, white. He's like, can you give me more than that? Maybe a black one.
Anything really else? Don't care.
I don't like orange and yellow cars. He's like, you are absolutely useless. I would say he said it nicer, but he may not have. That's all right. And so, but still, when she was giving that metaphor, and she's usually using it while she's talking about magic or vampires or werewolves, but she's comparing everything to fixing the dang cars that she fixes.
Yes.
And I'm fascinated. I'm completely enthralled because I feel like I'm with her in the character. It's her character voice. Yes. She doesn't use like cliche metaphors or phrases. It's all things that are specific and relevant to what she deals with every day in her life.
Yes.
That author has definitely sunk into that character voice.
I love that. It's like you have literally taken yourself and you've plopped yourself into some person that you are bringing to life, and they are different from you. They have lived a different life. Things mean different things to them. They have different motives and missions and loves and hates.
And reactions.
You know,
Fears.
do they explode? Do they just keep it quiet? Because that's what we do. We just keep things quiet. Always. You know, like there's just so many different things. And I think that also kind of adheres with style. I mean, that becomes your style to an extent, is what are your characters like? And it really differentiates your writing from so much, because that's what people read. You can tell Snow White over and over and over again, but if you use a unique, crazy, amazing, awesome voice, it's going to be brand freaking new. It's so fresh and different.
That's true. That's why there's so many retellings of stuff.
Yeah.
So many different versions of how to tell a story.
Yes.
Be careful with your consistency too, though. I mean, you have to make sure if they're having a reaction, especially if it's a big reaction, negative or positive, that you know what the trigger was. So every time that trigger comes up, you're consistent with your character.
Right.
For me, I warned Poppy before this episode when we were talking about it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to talk about this without going into my theater training. But That's where it all is for me. And so when we talked about this, I actually pulled it up so that I would have the author name. There's a book. I'm going to recommend a book for you guys. Okay.
Oh, I love this. I'm going to write it down.
You're going to look at me like I'm crazy because I'm recommending an acting book to you. But there's a reason. Here's the book, and I'm going to tell you why. It's called How to Get the Part Without Falling Apart. It's by Margie Haber, Haber. There's multiple versions of it out. She actually has an acting school, and this book is what she uses with the actors. And so there's like tons of different actors telling their stories. She's had so many famous people through her schooling. So the reason I bring this up is not because you need to actually act out on stage. I mean, if you have the itch, I would always encourage you to do so. But it's the type of process that an actor goes through in developing a character. So the dialogue is huge. The metaphors that we were talking about, how it's part of their day, but there's little details too that's outside of their dialogue. So everyone stands a certain way. Everyone holds their hands a certain way. Everyone has a physical tic when they're nervous, when they're uncomfortable. Everyone does something when they're excited. And it's not all the same. So especially if you see yourself going through and you write tons of shrug, smirk,
I'm
roll
the
your
sigh
eyes.
queen. I am so sorry. Yes, I am the sigh queen.
So
I have to go
this
back and edit the crap out of that.
And then you go back and you're like, well, what do I put here? I don't know. So for me, I'm not saying Poppy does that. I'm saying me in general. I'm like, I look back and I'm like, okay, this is the bazillionth sigh everyone's sighing. What do I put here? I haven't fully dove into the character. I don't know how they stand. Actors will stare at a mirror and look at different facial expressions, and they'll see what their face does in those expressions, and they do it primarily so they can train their face and they know what it feels like. So you can feel the muscles and then see what it looks like so you know what you're portraying. But it's also an interesting thing to do for developing a character, even if you're not training your face, if you're trying to find different reactions that are physical. Look at all the different things that your face does. Go and observe other people too. That's totally fine out in wherever you observe people. We live on a planet with people. Go find people. But look at the ways people react. The way they show fear, the way they show happiness. You can go, I mean, there's the emotion thesaurus.
Mm-hmm.
I have that. I can pull that up. Do you know who that is?
Gosh, we have so many good reference books right now.
It's okay. I like it for a basis starting.
Yep.
But you're also still just plugging in substitution, kind of like using it. It's a thesaurus. It's like, oh, I've said apartment too many times. What other words can I say for apartment? Instead of digging deeper and reorganizing your sentence structure so you're not saying the same thing, this is kind of the same thing with physical reactions and facial movements. Dig in deeper and find out how your character shows different emotions.
Yes.
And it's not that you're trying to do a different emotion each time. It's the same emotion, the same reaction to the same emotion.
Yes.
So when they're angry, they should have the same tics. And that kind of stuff is really fun for a reader because then they start picking up on it. And then sometimes you can start doing that tick and you don't have to say they're angry. You just do the tick they always do when they're angry. And the reader's going to be like, oh, they're pissed.
Oh, it's just going to blow up. Woo! Yeah. I mean, it's like you're training your reader, really. I mean, that's what you're doing. And you don't repeat it over and over again. You just start it out.
Only when it's triggered.
Yes.
Make sure you're consistent in your triggers. Don't do it outside of your triggers.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. So that's a really fun one for me. So the physical training... Well, not physical training, but the physical stance, the movements, the facial reactions, the tics. Clothes can tell a lot about a character too, their clothing choice.
Yes.
And depending on your genre, you're going to either go into more in the clothing or less in the clothing. Historical pieces, romances, they're going to go a little bit more elaborate in their costuming. Descriptions. And then quicker pace like thriller, mystery, horror, a little less, usually
if at all.
Yeah. And then urban fantasy is like the middle ground. They're going to say what she's wearing, but they're not going to tell you a whole bunch.
Yep.
So depending on your genre, make sure what you're saying says something. And sure, maybe you're trying to make your character look like some trope or stereotype. Dig a little deeper. Give them some accent in their clothing and costume that reveals something to the reader.
Yeah. Give something that means something to your character. Because your characters are supposed to be real people. I mean, we are relating when we read, we're relating to a real person. Real people have personalities and they have their own voices and their history and the things that make them who they are. Make that different from your own. It's important.
Definitely. I think character voice too, there's a lot of questionnaires out there that will give you like a bazillion questions you can answer. Which works. It's great. You can do it through role play. You can do it through questionnaires. You can do it through, I don't know, performing on stage, whatever works for you. But you should know the backstory of your character.
Yes.
You should know what they did before the book started, like their whole life. Because there's so many things that happen to us that make us who we are, that give us our scars, our confidence, our insecurities, our doubts, our lies that we tell ourselves about whatever, if we think dragons are real and dinosaurs are fake, whatever.
Yep.
All of that stuff is going to affect how we act now. And if you know that about your character, then it's not a guessing game of how they're going to react. You know exactly why, because you know what their triggers are.
Yeah.
Yes, it's kind of a lot of work, but how freaking cool is it that you're creating this entire person that is like fleshed out and real, and the more real they are, the more the reader will attach to them.
Absolutely.
Hobbies are big.
Hobbies are big, and I always forget them sometimes. It's like, I don't and I do. Like, some characters, I really focus on the hobbies, and then others, I'm like, I don't know what they like. Like, how do I not know what they like? I'll get into like the second and third and fourth edits, and I'm like, oh crap, like I really forgot, like, what does this person like? And it's really important because it really does make them who they are. And that can really help you out tremendously with your voice, because they're always going to be thinking about the things that they love the most. I mean, think about yourself. Think about yourself and the things that you consider in your mind when your like inner thoughts are going on, when your inner dialogue is happening. What does that mean to you? Are you incredibly sarcastic, or are you just straight up straight shooter, or do you just keep absolutely everything to yourself? Because that would be embarrassing if you let anything slip. We are all so vastly different. And that is for me, the most fun part ever about writing, is that you can actually study somebody else, and you can actually step into somebody else's shoes, and you can live their life with them. And that is just so incredibly cool, because they're a person and people are so neat. That is so fascinating as to what these people adhere to, whether it be bad, whether it be good. That's what's fascinating about villains. That's what's fascinating about your protagonist, what makes them who they are. And then take who they are and fix their voice to make it mean something to them. The stuff that they use, the way that they speak, is going to mean something for the way that they were raised. It's going to mean something to them, whether they shut down, whether they open up, whether they cuss and pitch a fit, or just be silent and do it in their head and steam and stew. Oh man, it's all so beautiful. I freaking love it.
I really like Poppy had mentioned just so many different people around us, right? There should be different people in your novels and your stories, which is a huge, huge issue right now in the writing industry, is diversity.
Yes.
And I really don't like the phrase, write what you know. As a fantasy writer, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because most of the things I'm writing aren't real. No one's going to know them.
Utterly dragged from your complete and utter imagination.
Yeah. So I'm like, that doesn't really work for me. But part of character voice, I do believe, is knowing that what religion they were raised in, where they live, the color of their skin, and the way they look, and how common it is in the area they're in, and how they're treated.
Yes.
All of those things are making a real character. Research body language, how your body reacts to different emotions, how the human body reacts to stress and happiness, and all the different weird tics and phobias that people can have, and all of that kind of research too is going to give you a plethora of writing tools for your characters.
Absolutely. I love fears and things like that as well, because we all have them. Cass, what are you afraid of? I don't even actually know this. I don't know if I've ever asked you this question. What are you afraid of?
Giant cockroaches.
Oh, that's a good one.
Living in Hawaii for 2 years, giant flying cockroaches that dive bomb you.
That's fairly terrifying.
My whole insides just feel gross right now talking about it.
And you were not in Hawaii, yet still, I bet you go out on a lovely summer day and go, oh my God, what if a cockroach comes out of nowhere and bombards me?
Oh, I don't like large bugs in general. Large centipedes, large spiders. Tropical areas suck.
I hear you.
What about you? What are you afraid of?
It's ridiculous. You're going to laugh.
Saran wrap.
It's seriously ridiculous. It's close. It's in the kitchen. I am terrified of biscuit pans.
Oh, that's really common.
Which is so funny because I never
It's
knew.
super
I
fun.
always thought I was completely insane because, like, I literally have to leave a room when somebody opens a biscuit can. I can't do it myself.
It's cute too.
I make my 9-year-old do it, which she totally does, and also likes to chase me around the house with it. But nonetheless, yes, I don't do biscuit cans, so they scare me. I am really terrified of a world-ending explosion with a biscuit can. I know it's absurd, but you know what? People are weird. So
I'm going to totally freak you out here. I left a biscuit can out on my counter.
Oh God,
once.
this just makes me like sweat. I'm sweating.
So like it's just like a explosion that's just building, it did, and dough flew up onto the ceiling. But it's like you never know what's going to come, Poppy.
Things are very seriously pressurized. It is terrifying. It is a very valid fear. Yes.
But all of this stuff is fun because knowing these things about a character, like this little interaction and conversation with us, that's how you build relationships.
It is.
And not just romantic, although romantic ones are valid.
Mm-hmm.
Your main character should be building relationships with all the people around them, even if it's a toxic, bad relationship. But you should have a variety of the types of relationships as well. And this is more variety. I think this is our second layer. Our character voice and second layer is variety, diversity.
It is.
They should have different fears. They should have different types of relationships in their life. And you should know what those are. And if you can't just go in and, I mean, you can, but it's not good storytelling to go in and be like, oh, and this is her best friend. It's much more interesting if she meets up with her while they're walking down the street and she starts talking about how she left the biscuit can on her counter because she knows her best friend has a fear of it.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, you know how much they know each other. You know that they're teasing each other. You know instantly there's this relationship because you've gone in and fleshed it out. You know how this character feels about people, and you get to show it.
Yes.
And there's a deeper layer when you get to do that.
And it's really fun using your secondary characters to explain your primary as well. People do have different walks of life and they do experience different things. And you might have somebody who has a roommate that is poor and had a really hard time, and they have a roommate that has a trust fund or whatever. And it's like you end up with these conversations and this diversity that's so different. It can tell so much about your main character when it's coming from somebody else that has a different voice, that it's just so different.
It brings an emotion too when they have to react to the realization that they're different because of that.
Yes.
Or
there's
like
guilt there.
Or that someone knows them that well.
Yeah. Or there's pride. I mean, there's so much that you can pull out with emotion wise that makes it a real situation. And that is super fascinating.
It makes a good read.
It does make a good read. And it gets you invested. When you're invested in a character because of their voice, like that is the best. Like I will keep going on a plot that doesn't quite fit for the sheer fact that I just like hearing them talk.
I will too.
You know?
If I love the character, I'll keep going with the series even if the plot's not quite there and the book before it's like, oh, they kind of messed that one up, but I love this character so much. Maybe they'll do better with this next book.
Yes absolutely.
Character voice is strong,
and being able to have that diversity there is really wonderful.
They're character foils. Yes.
Yep. And
it's a foil that reveals information about your main character in a more natural way than your main character just stating it.
Yeah.
Stuff that they wouldn't.
Because nobody likes a monologue. Nobody likes a character that's, you walk into a first chapter and they're okay, I'm sorry if you have written a book where your first character walks in and is looking into a mirror, but don't do that. Like, do something else.
You're going to get pinged on that.
Ooh, you're going to get pinged on that. Like I will crit you right now and tell you don't do that. Yeah, don't have it where your character's walking in is like, I am this exact person. Yes, this is who I am, looking into a mirror with my blonde hair and my green eyes or whatever, make it to where it's quirkier. Think beyond the box of standard. Don't make it easy for yourself. I know that sounds like ridiculous. Like, why wouldn't I make it easy for myself? Don't make it easy for yourself. Make it unique and different. I have a background in photography, and one of the most interesting and easy ways to make your photography interesting is to not stand upright holding your camera. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it's incredibly true. Squat, get on a ladder, do something different to where the perspective has been changed from what we see every single day. Because we know what that flower looks like when we're standing there staring at it. What happens when you get super close and you have grass blades in front of you because your camera's on the ground? I want to see that. And that to me can go into character voice. Show me something that is unique and different, and at the same time plops me into the head of somebody I don't know, because that is what I'm looking for as a reader.
That's what I'm looking for as a reader.
Yeah.
I can pretty much jump to just about any genre that I normally wouldn't touch if there's a character that I love enough.
Yes. Absolutely 100%.
And if you think about it too, you should be reading. You should be reading hugely in your genre and other genres. But let's face it, we all do like Netflix binges. We all watch movies that come out. Mm-hmm. And so there's great character studies too about who the character is, who you love and are rooting for, and why you love them.
Why? That's the biggest thing.
And you're going to be able to look at too, if you're doing that medium, a lot of the acting stuff I was talking about. Watch that stuff.
Yeah. Look at it with new eyes.
A lot of actors really put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah. And you don't realize it because it's easy to watch because they're real.
They're ones that are really good. They're not playing. You don't see them in a movie and just think their name. They are the character. Yeah. They're entirely different if it's a good actor. I'm not saying all of them are. We know that there are some that aren't.
Sure.
But they're a different person and you forget about the roles that they played before that one.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're a different character.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when you're creating a character for your book. Even though it's an author voice and the same author creating them, you are able to learn how to have a variety of tools to build this character. It's like going into the Build-A-Bear store. Has anyone gone into those Build-A-Bear stores?
I love the Build-A-Bear store. Yes.
You can make anything and everything, and there's all these options. But if you went into the Build-A-Bear store and there was only one type of bear with 2 hats, 3 jackets, and 4 ballet shoes.
Yep.
That's all you got to pick.
That's it.
You're going to have a better variety of characters the more tools that you fill into that store, the more options you get, the more clothing, wings, tails, makeup, headbands, hair, whatever it is that you're doing. Maybe it's he needs a geriatric cane. I don't know. Whatever's going on with your bear. So picture your character like you're going into the store to build them. Clothing, like the hats and the hair and the shoes, represented metaphors, hobbies, physical tics.
I like that.
Facial expressions. I'm talking about your character only size. It's because there's only 3 jackets, and one jacket side, right. One is shrug, one is smirk.
That's all you have.
So if you want to have a different bear, you need to go research what other physical reactions, what other vocal reactions, what dialogue quirks, what fears. There's lists for all of these things. Huge lists. Just go and Google them. And then all of a sudden you have 20 jackets instead of 1 to pick from. And not all of your characters are going to sigh anymore because now you have 20 other options of things they can do. And then you'll have 200 the more you develop and grow. Sure, I definitely, you can always, with character voice, the characters can look exactly the same. It's like having twins, and they can be different.
Absolutely different. Yep.
But take the time to learn how to put different personality traits into your character by understanding what different personality traits are.
I like that a lot. Yes, absolutely.
So that's my thoughts on that.
We have a lot of super good nonfiction to go along with this episode. I think we're going to play with it on TikTok. Is that okay with you, Cass?
That's okay. So that means you found us on TikTok if you're listening. Oh. Did you know that we do a weekly challenge on TikTok?
Oh my gosh. Join our weekly challenge. It is fascinating.
And Poppy's going to do something with books for this episode.
I don't quite know what it's going to be yet, but it's going to be great.
You're going to find out. Go find it and tell her how great it is. So, character voices. Gosh, I think that's pretty much all I have for a starting basis for building a character voice. Do you have anything else big that you do?
Character voice is so fun. And don't be afraid to use different literary devices for your character voice.
That's good.
Now you've dived into your character's background. You've dived into the way that their style. You've dived into who they are. You've dived into their diversity, their background, all the great things. Okay, so dive into that. And now think about how the way that they speak. So there are all kinds of different ways that you can really diversify the way. And let's just use the biggest example of diverse dialogue that I can possibly think of is Yoda. All right, so Yoda's dialogue, if you hear Yoda speak anywhere, you know that is Yoda because of the way that that's structured.
I think it's reverse sentence
structure, which is wacky pants and amazing and completely works for his character. And at first, you might sit here and you go, oh God, nobody's going to get this, right? Because I really wonder what the author of that thought. I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to switch the words around, jump out of the box. And that doesn't mean if they're drunk, make the be like slur speech all the time or something else, but just change it up. Use alliteration, use different literary devices, go study it, go check and see what kind of dialogue literary devices you can use for different characters and the way that they talk. Think of the way that Shaggy speaks in Scooby-Doo. Think about the way that Yoda speaks. Think about those characters that really stand out.
Recently did a pretty in-depth literary device Google binge. And just for anyone who's going out there to go do this, I didn't find a lot specifically for dialogue. They were just literary devices in general. And they kind of just, they listed a lot of basic ones, but like the bigger list ones, there's some that have like hundreds. I went through them and found some devices that I could use specifically for dialogue. Other ones I could use for pacing or whatnot. But there was one specifically, I forget what it's called, where the person constantly says the wrong word, misuses words. And I was like, oh, I totally have a character who does that. And I snatched it up and put it into dialogue. So if you specifically search devices and dialogue, I don't know if you'll get as extensive results. Just do literary devices. And you'll find a plethora of places to put them, but there's so many cool gems that you can use for dialogue. And I think, too, having a big list like that, you're going to have a list of characters in your head, so you won't know what you're looking for. You'll know your character, and you go through and read this list of devices and what they all mean and what they do, and you'll find one, they'll be like, oh, that's my character. Yes. I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Change it up. Make it different. Jump out of the box. Don't make it normal. You know, you end up talking to somebody, and you really make a connection. And why did you make that connection with that person? Was it the way that they put sentences together? Was it the information that they had? Was it the fact they were incredibly intelligent, or the fact that they weren't intelligent, but you know what? They totally knew it and they owned that fact. Or they just had heart and passion, and everything that they spoke about was just super important to them. And that is just so cool. We read because people are fascinating. We want to hear about these other parts and these things that we haven't experienced before. So do not make your characters exactly the same character. And just because you have an amazing author voice, and just because that you speak the way that you do and people sort of relate to that, it doesn't mean that every single character in your book has to do that either. Be a little scared, be brave, jump out, listen to people, and listen to the way that they put sentences together and the way they speak to each other and the curses that they use. Mix it up and make sure it's consistent.
That's like one of our favorite things to do, because we do write books together, and that's one of the things that's always when we're first writing. we actually will build a Pinterest board together, and so we get like visuals of what the other is thinking for setting, clothing, characters, and then we'll start doing Google Docs that we share, and one of the Google Docs is always character swears.
Do they actually just outright just shit, you know, or are they like monkey Saturn funky nuts? You just never know what the heck they're going to say. And that's just super fun just to make up stuff. Are they really embarrassed by swearing? Do they swear by the constellations? People get worked up when they are mad. And what do they say?
I have a rhyme and madness to my swearing. I always look at their religious beliefs, and I look at the culture they were raised in and who they were raised by. And it gives me a basis. So, like, I have books about witches, and my witches never say, like, God damn it.
Right.
It's always curse the goddess, or
which is
goddess
neat.
This or that.
Yeah.
Because it's going into their beliefs. And so it's personalized and specialized. And I think that's a lot, too, though, for me, because I'm fantasy. So I'm going to have societies and cultures that are a little different, and systems of swearing is a way to show that world. I don't know if it's as necessary. I don't know, though, because Poppy's got an amazing contemporary romance that's a holiday one, and I've never seen anyone so creatively use Christmas spirit as swear words. It's fantastic.
That was so hard. That was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. I'm like, okay, I've officially run out of Christmas swears. What do I do now? It's just so difficult sometimes to make Christmassy or whatever, just something that is funny or just tickle somebody or that just stands out, because really that's what it's about. You want to relate to a character and you want them to be interesting and unique, and making them unique is having them, what do they do under stress? You know, what do they do when they're super mad and some bus went by and splashed them with a puddle? How do they react? Do they just steam silently? No, they curse something. Do they curse the same thing that everybody curses? All right, maybe they do. And maybe they do it grandly and super loud so everyone ever can hear down the road in the taxi, in the building.
I want to mix the literary device where you say the wrong word, but as their swear words, they misuse words that aren't swear words as swear words. I want that character. Someone write me that.
Should definitely happen. But make them fun, make them unique, because people are fun and unique and weird and fantastic. Think about the most interesting person you've ever met and why you thought they were interesting. Why? That really is what it's all about, is the why behind it. Why were they interesting? Was it because they were super hot? That only lasts so long. Was it because they made you laugh because everything they said was this ridiculous study of sarcasm? Or was it because they were so smart that their humor was literally beyond half of the population? But you got it because you had studied Shakespearean literature of the 18th century. What makes them unique and fun and super great? That is voice. That is character voice right there, is a real person that you can relate to and you get and you understand. I love it. People are so cool.
That's it, guys. That's character voice. Keep looking. This week, for our TikTok challenge, we mentioned TikTok challenges earlier. We want you to go and do hashtag punch keys and let us know whatever character tool you use that we didn't mention.
Ooh, that's a good challenge.
Or if you don't have one we haven't mentioned, list your favorite. I'll take that too.
Awesome. Well done. Love it. Woo!
All right. Character voice, author voice has been handled. Anything else, Poppy dear?
Go write those amazing characters that are totally, totally real and just shock the world with their uniqueness.
And most of all, keep punching the damn keys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And if you liked this episode, please subscribe and give us that clickable 5-star love.
Got writer questions or feedback? Reach out through our website. And until next time, make sure to punch the keys.